I don't know about you, but I love a good story. That's why when I first played Undertale, I was absolutely shocked at how deep the lore actually goes. This is why I love the concept of Gaster. It really shows how to make a good expansive story. After going through the Undertale story multiple times, looking at the stuff in the game files, and cracking Easter eggs, I have finally come up with a good theory on who W.D Gaster actually is, what Gaster's role in the story is, and how the Undertale and Deltarune worlds are connected. Let's get started. To understand how my theory plays out, let's talk about who Gaster is. Gaster is a character that you probably would never run into in a normal Undertale playthrough, and someone that you probably have heard about online. The chances of running into Gaster or even one of his followers are extremely slim because your fun value, the value that gets set every time you start up a new game, needs to be a certain percentile for anything Gaster related to appear. Who is W.D Gaster? According to the Gaster followers, W.D Gaster was the royal scientist before Alphys, who apparently fell into his creation before shattering throughout time and space. Gaster was a genius scientist, probably even more genius than Alphys. Now, if Gaster was such a genius, it's quite obvious that he would know about alternate timelines, considering Alphys also knew about alternate timelines, and it is assumed that his genius furthered even more when he was shattered across time and space. He became so enlightened that he eventually found out about the Deltarune world. This is proven by Clam Girl. If your fun value was set correctly, you would get the chance to talk to Clam Girl. Clam Girl talks about her neighbor Susie, and how you and her should get to know each other. The dialogue is in nearly every version of Undertale, but it wasn't until the Nintendo Switch version was released that Clam Girl became a very important factor. If you speak to Clam Girl at the end of the game on the Switch version, she tells you that you will be meeting Susie soon before turning gray and disappearing. Clam Girl is a Gaster follower. Obviously, this was foreshadowing Deltarune before its release, but this also proves that Gaster knows of the Deltarune world. Now that we know what happened to Gaster, let's talk about how soul works to explain my theory better. At the end of Undertale's Genocide route, Kara asks you to erase the world, and no matter your decision, they'll kill you anyway. Following that, if you wait for 10 minutes straight, you'll get a voice saying that they'll restore the world, but the price is your soul. If you give them your soul, the world will be restored. Then when you start the game again and talk to Flowey, you'll notice that your soul is still there. Flowey even mentions it in the dialogue. So what happened here? Well, the most common theory is that the voice at the end of the game wanting your soul is Kara. Well, what if I told you that voice is actually Gaster? Now, of course, that probably sounds like a crazy statement, but let me explain myself really quickly. Have you ever noticed that once Frisk wakes up in the flower bed, you gain control over them? Not a moment sooner? You would assume that if you were Frisk this entire time, you would have control over them since the moment that they were born. In this game, you are playing as Frisk, just for a small portion of their life until you decide to save and reset. Did you also notice how Frisk never had the ability to save and reset before entering the underground? Once the game begins, you take control of the game to play the game. That's what gamers do. Once you begin the game, you have asserted your will and your life over Frisk. The reason you don't have control over Frisk not a moment sooner before they wake up in the flower bed is because the game hasn't begun yet. You can't take control over Frisk after the end of the game because the game has ended at that point. You have naturally taken control over Frisk to make decisions. This is why there are multiple endings, multiple routes, genocide and pacifist. You have the ability to do whatever you want in this game. At the end of Genocide, when that voice takes your soul, they aren't taking Frisk's soul. They are taking your soul, you as the player. It isn't until you wake up in the flower bed again that you generate a new soul because the game has begun once more. So let's say that this voice has taken your soul. Who is this person? What are they doing with it? Well, let me tell you, this voice is actually Gaster's voice. Here's why. The tone that the voice uses at the end of Genocide is very similar to entry number 17, Gaster's entry, as well as the voice that can be seen on the Undertale's Twitter account, and also the same tone of voice at the beginning of Deltarune during the character creation process. There's a common wordplay here that all these voices have in common. The word interesting. That word, the word interesting, can be read in a mysterious tone of voice. At the end of Genocide, in entry number 17, and at the end of the character creation process in Deltarune, that voice can be heard saying interesting. This voice cannot be Kara because it doesn't fit their character. Kara has never said interesting before. In fact, they say, how curious. Also, if this was Kara's voice, why would they offer to bring a world back that they worked so hard to destroy? If this was Kara, why wouldn't you see Kara like you did before when they were talking to you? Gaster is a scientist. Naturally, as a scientist, Gaster would want to do experiments. Even without being there physically anymore, Gaster still wants to fulfill his duties as a scientist, which is why Gaster wants your soul at the end of Undertale's Genocide. Gaster took your soul and put it inside of Chris as an experiment. This is why the only two characters that you can take control in this series is Frisk and Chris. Chris doesn't realize it at first, and neither do you as the player. When you first played Deltarune, you were obviously confused. Is this a sequel or a prequel? Why does Undyne have both eyes? So naturally, you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Chris is acting normal because they don't realize you're inside of them trying to assert your will yet. It isn't until you exit the Dark World that Chris realizes what's happening. You as the player has now become too comfortable and now has complete control over Chris. Chris can't even choose where to go or what to do on their own anymore because you have decided what to do for them. This is why Chris can't play the piano anymore. Why they look perplexed at the flowers that they even signed themselves. And you can tell Sans that it's nice seeing them again. You have completely taken over Chris because you experienced Undertale's story, but Chris did not. This is why Chris rips out your soul at the end of Deltarune. Chris doesn't want your soul inside of them anymore. Unlike Frisk, who probably doesn't realize it, Chris fully realizes that they are acting like a completely different person. So Chris rips out your soul to gain their freedom back. This theory goes even deeper now, so brace yourselves. We've barely scratched the surface. In the Deltarune world, the monster and human war never happened. This war sets the foundations for the Undertale story. Without the war, several changes take place that we can see in Deltarune. Asgore isn't the king. Undyne has both eyes and is a cop. Alphys and Toriel are teachers. There isn't a royal guard, and guess what else? There isn't a royal scientist. Think about it. If the monster and human war never happened, why would there be a need for a royal scientist? Exactly, there is no reason. So what if I told you that there would be no reason for Gaster to fall into his creation? In this world, there wasn't a creation to fall into because a royal scientist was never needed. So let's say that Gaster is alive in the Deltarune world and perhaps doing his own different experiments inside that bunker that we see at the end of Deltarune. What would Gaster be doing in there? Well, he's probably still doing experiments, but perhaps less dangerous. Let me tell you something. This Gaster has discovered the Dark World and can move freely between the two worlds. In fact, this Gaster, being as smart as he is in correlation with the other Gaster that was shattered across time and space. The Undertale Gaster started the story, and the other Gaster is forging the story for scientific purposes. So how is this Gaster forging a story exactly? The story goes that in the Dark World, there used to be 4 kings, until one day a knight appeared and the 3 kings were thrown into prison while 1 king and his son remained in power. The knight that is talked about in Deltarune is Gaster, and we can see this in the Undertale game files. The most common examples of Gaster are entry number 17, and the mysterious man appearing in Waterfall, as well as the Gaster's followers, but there is even more. Hidden deep into the game files of Undertale. One of these examples is an unused room with a mysterious figure inside. If you talk to this figure, it says redacted in Wingding's font. If you leave the room, it takes you to the sound test room, where Gaster's theme can be played. Now, this isn't the only place that this figure can be seen. This figure can also be seen in more unused stuff in Undertale's game files. In the game files exists an unused horse stable. If you interact with this horse stable, it states that it's locked and needs a key. The key can be found in an unused trash can. If you take the key out of the trash can and use it to unlock the horse stable, the mysterious figure appears again and says the same thing in Wingding's font, redacted. If we assume that Gaster can only speak in wingdings, we can assume that this mysterious unused figure is Gaster. We can also assume that this is the knight that everyone talks about in Deltarune, because in most board games, a knight is represented by a horse. And who is in a horse stable in Undertale? Gaster is. Now, only one thing that perplexed me for a while is that the mysterious figure that appears in these two unused locations is completely different from the mysterious man we see in Waterfall in terms of design. The mysterious man has been confirmed as Gaster for a while, as merchandise for Undertale has actually confirmed it on accident. So why does this unused mysterious figure appear different from the mysterious man? Well, let me tell you, Gaster actually has two forms. It took me a while to come up with a reason why Gaster has two forms, but it didn't just click until recently. So hear me out. Once Chris and Susie fell into the Dark World in Deltarune, the most noticeable difference that's usually first spotted is that they look entirely different from the Chris and Susie we've already seen at the beginning of the game. The Dark World affects the design of whoever falls into it. So what if one Gaster is how Gaster looks normally, and the other form is how Gaster looks in the Dark World? If I would have to guess, it's that the mysterious figure in the horse stable is how Gaster looks in the Dark World, because the horse stable, again, represents how Gaster is the knight of the Dark World. At this point, I have concluded my theory. What did you think of it? My mind has been on this subject for weeks now, and I have finally come to sufficient evidence to make this theory into a video. I know this is really different from my usual videos, but I wanted to put this out there. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments below who you think Gaster is. See you later.